Feeling better, stress, anxiety. I want to thank Hannah and Jerry and Dia and the rest of the group from the mindfulness program. And they taught me so much along the way. And it's with great joy that I get Hannah, who is at times my personal counselor, a counselor of many in the whole group. And she has so much insight on how we can actually manage our feelings. Right now, I'm feeling a little stressed right now because I'm supposed to be finished my clinic an hour ago. I'm supposed to be going to a football game. I still have patients to see. But you know what? I'm going to live in the present. I'm just glad to be here at this moment and enjoy what's going to happen next. So, Hannah, take it away.
Thank you, Dr. Curnew. And yes, thank you to everyone who's watching tonight. As Dr. Curnew said, my name is Hannah, and I'm one of the volunteers who facilitates the mindfulness, moving, and motivation group. Sometimes it's very hard to remember the three M's in order. But welcome. I hope you enjoy the webinar tonight. We're going to be talking a little bit about COVID-19. It's been a long haul, and it's really done, I think, a lot of things for a lot of people, not in the best ways. And today we want to talk a little bit about how we can use mindfulness to really manage the stress and anxiety that's, I think, kind of going on a lot in our world today. And just it's really an opportunity for us to talk about what we can do to really support each other and support our mental health. So if you do have any questions or comments to make, feel free to add them in the chat on the side. So just to start a little bit, I think it's been 3 years now, or almost 3 years since we've been in this pandemic. It's a very long time. I don't think anyone would have imagined that we would have been in this position back in 2019. And I did want to just bring everyone's attention to a statistic that I kind of saw recently, and it was from Statistics Canada, and they asked Canadians to report their mental health. And so, high self reported mental health is considered the Canadians who reported themselves to have very good or excellent mental health. And they sorted that out by age group and period of time. So, they measured from 2018 to 2022, and then these rows or the different colors represent different time periods. So, it goes from 2018, 2019, 2020, and then 2022. Now, what I really found unfortunate is that when we look across all these age groups and across that long time period, it's just a general decline. And overall, we see that for Canadians ages 12 and over, their self-reports of mental health have decreased over the years. And this is, of course, just a statistic. And I think a lot more can be said personally in all of our lives about how COVID-19 has affected us. But I think it's just one of the ways where we can really think about just how much of an impact it's really made. And I think some of those challenges that probably won't even be listed here, but it includes things like being stressed, being anxious, feeling depressed, just healing and navigating the process of coping with loss and grief. And then I think one of the unique things that I think we're now finding challenging is this idea where we were isolated and in lockdown for quite some time. And now we're in a period where we're having to face this social reintegration and being able to go back to socializing with others. And personally, that's something that I really struggled with when we started coming out of lockdown. I found it really hard to be in a setting where there's a lot of people, just because of how anxious it can be sometimes. And I think that's a struggle that a lot of people are having. And then we, of course, have the numerous challenges that come with just our physical health, whether that's attributed to or not attributed to COVID-19, and navigating healthcare and receiving support during a pandemic. It's by no means easy. A lot of those struggles also come with our reliance now on technology and navigating those challenges as well. So if you really think about it, it's just this web of many challenges that are connected to one another. And so one of the things that I thought about for this webinar was just how we can navigate that stress and anxiety and what things we can do, tangibly speaking, to face it and use our thoughts in a way that can be productive and making ourselves feel better. So in light of that, you might be wondering, why we are jumping into this discussion about mindfulness and where that fits in this conversation about anxiety. And I really wanted to bring this kind of graphic here. I probably brought this up a few times on our channel, and I know Dr. Curnew really likes it as well. But as you can see on the left-hand side, the person is thinking about quite a lot. We see a bit of sadness. We see perhaps loved ones that they're thinking about perhaps all the things that are stressing them out and things to come. And then we have their dog on the right side, whose thought bubble just has what is in front of them: trees, the sun, and the sky. And I think this is always a challenge of being mindful, because I think in our busy, busy world, it's very hard not to have a mindful. And so this is, I think, a topic that will continuously come up for everyone about how challenging it can be to integrate mindfulness into our daily lives. So to define mindfulness, we can
You know,
describe it.
Hannah, I love that picture you have over here.
I know, Dr. Curry.
I see that picture so many times, and I see my mind cluttered. And what I'm trying to do when I go walking is actually listen to the birds and the wind. Some days I just find myself on that person on the left, and some days I wish I was more like the dog on the right, or whatever. But this is really true. I think you taught me this really well. Is that we have somewhere between 40 to 80,000 thoughts that go through our minds most days. Most of the time, we're not aware of what's going on. Most of them can be unpleasant and repetitive. So you can see how stressed out you can be if you're not aware of what's going on. So tell us how we get to live in the present like this, because I think that's a wonderful thing. You taught me that, and some days I can do a good job at it, some days I fail miserably. So keep telling us more. I think it's a really important point.
What Dr. Kearney, I think everyone struggles. I myself too struggle. I know I talk a lot about mindfulness, but it's something that I find even difficult sometimes to really get into the habit of not having to think about it, but rather making it a practice that I integrate into all the things that I do. Because I think the unique part about mindfulness is that you don't necessarily have to sit down and clear your mind like you would have to with meditation. Mindfulness can be really just a core pillar of your life, and thinking about it in terms of how we can integrate it into all the little things that we do, like drinking coffee in the morning, taking a nature walk. All of those things can involve mindfulness, even though we're still in the process of doing something. And so, really, it comes down to being fully present in the moment. And just like Dr. Kearney said, listening to the birds, listening to what's going on around you in that very moment, and not really thinking about anything else, and rather bringing awareness to the emotions, the thoughts, the sensations that you might be having, without trying to interpret or judge them. And I think that last part is especially really important, that when we are trying to be mindful, it's important that we don't over exaggerate or undermine the things that we're experiencing. All of us have our own experiences and our own backgrounds and things that do trigger us. And so when we're being mindful, it's always an important thing to be kind to yourself and recognize that there's a lot of strength in trying to be mindful. I think starting out, it can be really hard to wrap your mind around what that means and what that looks like for you. So, having said that, I did want to talk about a study that I read about recently. And it was a study where they asked 19 people who participated in a mindfulness based blood pressure reduction program. And they went through a couple weeks of practicing mindfulness together. And what they found when they asked these participants what benefits they thought they reaped out of this mindfulness program was that they felt more self aware. They felt that through being mindful, they were able to be more cognizant of those thoughts, those feelings that they had. And in turn, what that did was help them to sustain their attention more. So they could pay more attention to the things that they were doing, being more present, but it also helped them regulate their emotions. And we know that being able to regulate your emotions are also a core part of being able to maintain our relationships. So all of those traits really factor into one another, being able to sustain a happy and healthy life. And having more self-awareness and being able to regulate our emotions more also improves our stress management and even just our ability to perceive ourselves as able to conquer those stresses that we have. I think one of the challenges about dealing with stress is when we feel overwhelmed and we think that we're not able to take those on, that can make it that much more daunting to face what we're worrying about. And so I think this also speaks to the importance of using mindfulness as a way to boost our self efficacy or our own beliefs in ourselves to be able to do the things that we want to do. And I thought this is interesting too. So some of the participants mentioned that having increased self awareness made them want to fulfill more heart healthy behaviors. So, one of the key examples was they found themselves kind of stopping before trying to eat junk food in the evening, or they found themselves wanting to try more healthy food and being conscious about the decisions that they were making day to day. So, that's, I think, a really nice, observation that shows how mindfulness can be really beneficial, not just for our minds, but our bodies as well. And of course, this is just one study, but we know in the plethora of literature that's available, there's been many studies done that have been suggesting that mindfulness is a promising support and kind of solution to reducing cardiovascular risk, just because of how it can be beneficial in reducing our blood pressure and kind of teaching us how to self navigate our emotions. So, having said that and being in the moment, we are all here today listening to this webinar. So, I thought it would be a good opportunity for us to also try out mindfulness. And I do want to reiterate this is not like meditation where there's a strict way of doing it. And I think the key, myth about mindfulness is that in order to do it right, you have to kind of expel everything that's on your mind. But I think mindfulness can be thought of more as a practice where you get to recognize the parts of yourself that you might kind of think is on autopilot on a day to day basis. So, really paying attention to the thoughts that you're having, the emotions that you're feeling in that moment. And so, really want to encourage you to try it out, but don't feel too pressured or think that you're doing it wrong. I don't think there's really a bad, necessarily a bad way to be doing mindfulness. And of course, it's one of those things where the effort also counts. And the more practice that you have at it, the more you'll kind of get a grasp for it, whether that's a guided mindfulness meditation or even just on your own throughout the day, taking breaks to do mini mindfulness moments. That also works as well. So I'm going to set as a timer for 5 minutes. Okay, so you can be sitting or lying down, it's up to you. But we're just gonna comfortably in a comfortable position, relaxing our shoulders, just relaxing our bodies. Of course, today is a Friday night. I'm sure it has been a long week for some of you. So hopefully this practice is relaxing and calming and a way to really get out of our thoughts and kind of into what we really want to be feeling. Okay, so just gonna keep focusing on our breathing today. So one of the things that I really like about mindfulness is that it reminds me how much our body does for us. And I want you to just pay attention to your inhales and exhales as we be mindful. Just inhaling. Exhaling. And if you'd like, you can also close your eyes as we do this practice. And as you inhale and exhale, you might also think about how the breath moves through our body. And it can also be an opportunity where we give a moment of appreciation to our bodies and to our minds and think about all the marvelous things that we're able to do on a day-to-day basis with all of our body parts, our muscles, our neurons, our brain cells. And I think it can be very helpful to really connect that appreciation with this moment of choosing to be mindful. And as you do that, there might be some thoughts that are coming to mind, as they always do. And I really want to encourage you to, rather than trying to push them away, let them float by. You can let them in, let them have their moment as we become aware of what that thought or feeling is. And as we do that, just let it go. Let it float on by. And all the while, just focusing on how we're breathing, not having to change how we breathe at all. But thinking about what our inhales and exhales are like. And just making space in our minds for the present moment. And while we might be pondering the past or the future in those thoughts, as soon as you notice having those thoughts, try to bring yourself and center yourself back to the awareness you have on your breath. And just allow your mind to rest on the breath as it goes in and out of your body. You're all doing a wonderful job. And have a few extra quiet moments. And as we end our session, I just want to encourage you to always be gentle and kind to yourself and give yourself the space to be present, to be grateful, and to really meet yourself where you're at without judging yourself for how things are going. And as we come to the end of the session, once you're feeling comfortable and ready to return, feel free to open your eyes, loosen the shoulders some more. And then just take a nice last breath as we come out of this practice. Great job, everyone. I hope everyone found that calming and a nice way to start off or end off the Friday night. I find that that little sigh or kind of big last breath at the end is always nice. Sometimes sighing can be very helpful and almost, I think, stress relieving. It just lets us release whatever is pent up inside of us for that day or that moment. So there is an acronym that I want to introduce for those of you who might be a little more new with mindfulness. This can also be a helpful strategy to think about what you do during mindfulness. And this acronym is called STOP. So STOP stands for stop for a moment, take a breath, observe your experience, recognizing that this experience is temporary and thoughts aren't always facts, and proceed mindfully in a way that effectively responds to the situation. So that is what STOP stands for. And I think this would be a really useful acronym for times when something has happened and we want to react or things are feeling very overwhelming. I think this acronym can really serve as a reminder for us to halt everything we're doing before we act and think about how we can respond rather than react to the situation. No matter how upsetting it may have been in that moment, really just taking a moment to step back and think about it can sometimes be very helpful for us to think about what would be the best outcome or way for me to handle this situation. And of course, this acronym is just a suggestion. You don't have to use it or follow it in order to practice mindfulness, but having that kind of verbal or written reminder can be helpful for some, so I want to suggest it. And so on the vein of mindfulness, I want to talk a little more specifically about ways to manage anxiety and resources and tools that are available currently to help support you with navigating anxiety. So when we talk about anxiety, I think it's a natural occurrence for us to be anxious sometimes in those situations where we're worried about the future, worried about the outcomes of something, maybe worried about something that we've done. But it then becomes a concern when those anxieties that we have are long lasting. And sometimes we notice that it's long lasting and concerning when the thoughts that we're having don't really align with what everyone around us is being worried about. It might feel like we're overreacting or it feels a little bit out of proportion, but those are the things that are worrying us. And so the first thing I want to talk about was cognitive distortions. And essentially what these are unhelpful and distorted patterns of thinking where we kind of make ourselves out to be the bad person. So an example of this would be like all or nothing thinking. So essentially, when we think that something that has happened to us or something that we've done is either the best or worst thing that could have ever happened. It might include mental filtering, where even if there are positives to a situation or positives to the parts of ourselves that we feel proud of, mental filtering would be kind of dismissing those positive parts and focusing and really magnifying the negative parts and focusing on the negative parts to the point where the positives don't really make a difference. And so those examples are kind of listed here as negative mental filtering or disqualifying the positive. And so both of those instances are when, even though there's positives, we have a tendency to focus on the negative. Overgeneralization is another cognitive distortion that we might also find ourselves privy to, where we turn one example or one instance of something that's happened and assume that it'll become a pattern. So the common example I think of with this is for students, if they've received a bad grade on one exam, an example of overgeneralization would be that they take that one exam and assume or think that they'll fail the rest of the course, when really they've been doing well up until that point, and it was just a tough period where they weren't really able to focus for that exam. And this last one over here is jumping to conclusions. And the terms that we often use under this umbrella is mind reading or fortune telling. And as you might imagine, it's exactly what they say. It's when we assume that we know what the other person is thinking, or we know what's about to happen to us, and we make the assumptions and think of the worst possible outcome. And this is one of the instances or distortions that I think occur often with social anxiety when someone is feeling anxious about how others are perceiving them. I think this jumping to conclusions would come up a lot because they'd worry that anything they said or did could offend the other person. And that's an example of distorted thinking when I think we often think that people are paying attention to what we're doing, but oftentimes I think other people are very involved in their own lives and the problems that are going on in their own lives. And we often, I think, magnify how much of a difference we are making in having our own problems when all of us are just working through our own. And these two next examples are also examples of cognitive distortions that I think would probably come up more so than the ones I just mentioned. So this first one is emotional reasoning. And essentially, it's if I feel it, it must be true. So if I feel that something is wrong, or if I feel like I have done something wrong, then it must be true. So it means that our thoughts are the reality and the truth. But I'd say here that not all thoughts are facts. And one of the things that we talk about when managing anxiety is that oftentimes thoughts that we have, especially negative ones, they're actually just beliefs that we hold because of experiences we've had, because of things people may have told us while we were growing up, because of traumas that we haven't really worked through. But we have this tendency to think that what we think are the real truth, especially when it comes to perceiving how others think of us, or maybe the degree of harm that we've done to someone else or to ourselves. So I really want to bring that up and just kind of let everyone kind of have this idea sink in about thinking that not all thoughts are facts. And the second one is control fallacies. And for this one, there are two extremes. It's either when someone feels like they have control over nothing, or they have complete control over everything and everyone around them, that when things go wrong, they feel solely responsible for those things. And I think control fallacies are probably one of the more important ones when we talk about managing anxiety, because for a lot of people, I think especially during COVID, when things happen, I think we often struggle with the idea of the fact that the future is uncertain, and especially when we're in lockdown, especially when we're not able to do much about our situation, kind of feeling like we have control over nothing is how we might feel. And then conversely, if there are a lot of things that are happening that we feel we're solely responsible for, that can also be incredibly harmful to us because we can't control everything or everyone. And this is something we talk a lot about in our 3Ms group, that ultimately we don't have control over everything, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we have control over nothing. It just means that what we do have control over is the way we choose to respond to situations and how we choose to respond to people when we're unhappy about what's going on. And it brings us back to the locus of control, or where your locus of control is. And when I say locus of control, I'm referring to when kind of the degree we think that the surroundings and the people around us are responsible for our circumstances, or whether we think that we have power over our situation to be able to change the present. So if you think that the outcomes and the things that you're experiencing are more so because of the people around you and your circumstances, that would be a more external locus of control. Whereas if you think that the outcomes of your decisions are based because of what you've done and what you've thought out and set out to do, that would be a more internal locus of control. And I don't want you to think of it like it's a black and white situation where thinking that other people are responsible for kind of the things that are happening in your life are bad. And it's just that we need to have an internal locus of control. I like to think of it as having a balance between the two, because sometimes other people are a big factor of why we're feeling the way we feel. And it's not always about what we've said or what we've done, but sometimes other people have done things that may have hurt our feelings and affected the way we respond to situations. But conversely, sometimes we do have the power to change things. And so being able to navigate that balance between the two can be really challenging. And so when I was looking up strategies to challenge anxiety and to challenge anxious thoughts that we might be having, I came across this worksheet that was posted by CAMH, the Center for Addiction and Mental Health. And they gave a couple steps about how to manage anxiety when you feel like it's too much. So when you're feeling stressed, they say to identify what thoughts you're having. And so these might start off as, what if this or that happens? Or I'm worried that something extreme will happen. And once you identify what thoughts you're having, they say to challenge those thoughts with questions that sound like, is this thought true? How do I know it's true? Is it 100% and always true? What evidence do I have that supports this thought? And what evidence do I have against it? And if it's a certain scenario that we're thinking about, asking yourself, has this happened before or something similar? And if so, how did I cope with that situation? And what were the outcomes of that situation? And by challenging these thoughts, it's really about reframing the way you're looking at the situation and thinking about all perspectives that are involved in that situation, rather than the current feeling or thought we're having that's making us feel really anxious. So their next suggestion was to consider how productive this thought is. So is worrying about this helping me to solve a problem or helping me feel better? Or is it just making me anxious? So is it something that I have control over, or is this something that I'm worrying about and not really able to do much at this moment? And for some of the thoughts, at this point, we might be feeling, okay, I have a grip over why I'm feeling anxious about this. But for thoughts that kind of stay in our minds, they recommend taking that thought and thinking about whether it's possible to come up with a more balanced way of thinking. So instead of looking at it in extremes, maybe thinking about, how can I cope differently when this thought comes up next time or another time? What am I missing about this situation that I've now gained by thinking about whether I have kind of evidence or proof that what I'm thinking is true? And what evidence do I have that doesn't make it true? And using kind of those conclusions that we've drawn about the thought, coming up with ways to make it a productive one and making it one where if we have that thought again, we have the mechanism to remind ourselves that's not necessarily all true or all black and white. And so I think Dr. Curnew asked me to share a couple screening or self-assessments that you might want to look into if you'd like to kind of gauge where your anxiety is at. I will say that it's always best for us to talk to medical professionals who understand these assessments most. But one of the things that we use as a screening tool is called the GAD-7. So GAD stands for Generalized Anxiety Disorder. And this questionnaire is made up of 7 questions, and it measures common anxiety symptoms. So generalized anxiety disorder itself refers to kind of excessive worrying about kind of just day-to-day practices where it affects our routines. And so when we talk about this screening tool, it really helps us to gauge whether we're having a little bit of anxiety or a lot of anxiety. And so here they ask you 7 questions, and each response that you give is allotted a number. And once you tally up that number, you'll have a score from 0 to 21. And they recommend here if your score is 10 or higher, so whether you have moderately severe or severe anxiety, to contact your doctor. But I did want to emphasize the other part they say here, which is that no matter what your score is, if you're feeling anxious or stressed, or you're feeling down and it's affecting your daily life and affecting your everyday activities, it's really important to seek support, whether that be your family doctor, your counselor or therapist, or just the local mental health services and helplines that many communities have. I think scores are not reflective of our current situations, and sometimes we do a very good job of hiding how much that stress affects us. But if you are feeling that it's affecting your work, it's affecting your ability to enjoy your hobbies and enjoy spending time with others, I think those are all things where it's really important to think about the supports that we have and reaching out to medical professionals if you do need that support. And some other self-tests for wellness. So this organization is called Here to Help, and it's based in BC, but they provide screening tests for depression, anxiety, mental well-being. So this one just asks you about all different parts of your mental well-being and what things you might want to work on. Body image, risky drinking, and cannabis use. And they provide these screening tests. You don't have to make an account or anything, but they do ask for your age and gender. And I believe it's optional information to share, but it does help them decide maybe if there's a better test for you to be taking, depending on the menu that they have in there. But this can be a really great way for you to see if you're considering looking for extra medical help, if you'd like to take these screening tests and then take the results to your family doctor and talk a little bit about what's going on, whether you're feeling anxious or depressed. I think it can be very helpful to gauge how you're feeling. But again, like I said, these are not reflective of how you might be feeling. This might say that it's not too much to be a concern about, but you might feel that it's really affecting your life, in which case always rely on how you're feeling and seek help whenever is needed. And then this next one is an anxiety management program. So it's called My Anxiety Plan, and it's for adults. And it's a program that's based in cognitive behavioral therapy. So I was just talking about cognitive distortions, and those are just unhelpful and repetitive, kind of distorted ways that we often think and we fall into holes with. And the premise of cognitive behavioral therapy is that if we're able to recognize those distorted patterns of thinking and perhaps behaviors that we have associated with being anxious, just by recognizing them, it helps us to develop better coping strategies with our anxiety. And so really I think this program might be beneficial for you if you're looking to kind of have self-guided support where you get to kind of pace out how much you're learning, how much you're working through it. So some of the topics include understanding anxiety, calming strategies, how to be a helpful thinker, so how to have thoughts that are productive, and facing fears. And I did look through and see what topics there were. And under each of those bigger categories, they have several videos that are around 10 minutes long. And this is really nice because you don't have to watch all the videos in order. You can skip ones that you think aren't relevant for you at this time. And I think that can be really useful where you have this tool where you'll always have it. And I do believe this one requires an account because they're able to track which videos you've seen, which handouts that you may have accessed. And I think all the handouts as well are printable, so it's not completely online. So if you do want to keep track of it by paper, you can do that as well. But I did want to share this because it is a free course, and I think it'd be very helpful if you want to do this on your own and just learn more ways for us to manage anxiety on a day-to-day basis, even if you're not having moderate to severe anxiety. And if in the case you're having very severe anxiety and you have a counselor or therapist that you're speaking to on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, I think it would be great to work through this program with them and tell them how you're finding it and letting them kind of fill in the gaps or fill in questions that you have related to navigating that anxiety. yeah, I just want to share this program if you are interested, and we can definitely have the links below after this webinar, so that if you'd like to look into the program, and if you ever do have questions about how to make the account, please feel free to reach out to us. So all that said, now that we've talked a bit about managing anxiety, I did want to talk about just general ways we can explore how to feel better. And I think this is really a theme of our channel, where we talk a lot about how to have a healthy lifestyle. And I thought about the best ways we could categorize it, but all of these are related to keeping our physical health in check, just by staying active, by having a consistent sleep schedule, and monitoring what's going in our bodies. And I think these three kind of pillars are all ones that we emphasize in various videos. And especially with diet, I think when we think about diet, we just think about what we're eating, but that also means thinking about how much alcohol and how much nicotine exposure we're having, and thinking about all the parts that make up our habits and the lifestyle that we're living is really important, because all of those things affect our minds as well. So speaking of habits, I almost forgot I put this in here. We're going to take a quick stretching break. And I see that Dr. Curnew is already doing our first exercise, which is just seated or standing marching.
Yeah, keep moving, everybody.
So if you are seated, you're welcome to stand up and do this as well. But depending on how you're feeling, I'm just going to take a quick break standing up. We're just going to essentially walk, and we can raise your knees as far as you can, as far as it feels comfortable, and keeping your core, your stomach tight, not letting it kind of loose, but keeping it tight. And just continue to raise those knees up and down, alternating them. And if we want to incorporate our arms, as I know Jerry likes to, we can alternate those as well for that extra challenge. But yes, I thought that all of us, I don't know how much exercise we've been doing today, but on Fridays, it's really, I think it's the end of the week. I always find that's harder for me to encourage myself to exercise. So this is kind of a nice way to force ourselves to get a little bit of activity. And the next one is called mountain pose. This is actually just a yoga pose. I'm going to stand tall with our heels together and our big toes touching. And we're just going to let our arms down. Inhale, feel our belly expand outwards as we relax our shoulders down and back. And we're going to just exhale. And we'll do that 5 times. So inhale, exhale, inhale. Again, feeling our belly expand outwards. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. And last one. In and out. Lovely. You're all doing a great job. So this next one is called the standing quadricep stretch. You might be familiar with this one, but if you're feeling that it might be a balancing act, feel free to have a chair for support. I'm just going to hold on to my desk over here, but essentially we're going to hold on to the chair or whatever support you have with your left hand, and we're going to bend the right knee back and bend it so that we can we can grab our right knee or right ankle with our right hand. I do find that I personally find it more comfortable to reach for my right foot toes, or like my right toes rather than the ankle, but it's really up to you and how it feels comfortable. And if this is challenging, feel free to also just stop where we just lift our right leg and just have it in the air. I know it can feel a bit discomforting if we're trying to reach for our leg. So it's okay to stop at this part where you just lift your leg. I'm going to gently bring our leg back down and repeat the exact same thing, but with our left leg. Again, you can reach for your left ankle if it feels comfortable, but if you're feeling that it doesn't feel very good, that's okay. Just lift your left leg as far back as you can while holding on to a chair or kind of a support. And then bring our leg back down. Great. Okay, the next two are just seated. So this is all the standing we're doing for this webinar. But great job, everyone. For this one, it's called the overhead side stretch, a favorite of mine when I'm doing work at the computer all the time. We're just gonna raise our left arm and then lean our torso toward the right. We don't want to lean our entire our entire upper body to the right, but we just want to lean to the side as far again as it feels comfortable. I'm going to hold it and return to center. And I'm going to take our right arm and lean to the left. Just keeping your core as tight as you can. Doesn't have to be too strict, but it helps to really keep our posture there. And return to center. And then let's do one more on each side. So left arm, lean to the right. And holding it. I really feel the stretch here, so hoping that some of you are as well. And return to center. And then last one, right arm, lean to the left. And if you aren't already doing so, make sure to keep breathing as we do these. And return to center. Okay, and last one is the seated knee to chest. So as we sit in our chairs, let's just use both hands to grasp our right knee and slowly bring it up towards our chest. And it doesn't have to be completely. Don't want to be bending our back too much, but just bring your knee up as far as it feels comfortable. And once you feel that stretch, you can gently bring our leg back down. We're going to repeat with the left side. So grasping with both hands, our left knee, we're going to bring it up and slowly bring it up towards our chest. And bring it down. Lovely. That concludes the end of our stretch break, but I hope it was a nice breather in between all this information that we're sharing today. So I just mentioned some of the pillars to a healthy lifestyle. And one of the things that I want to bring up was this study. So this study is called the Harvard Study of Adult Development. And it's a study that started all the way back in 1938 and is still currently going on, which I find is very, very cool. And essentially what they did here was follow the lives of, I believe, almost or close to 1,000 men who they follow them throughout their lifespan up until this point. And I believe they're currently kind of researching or doing research with their children. So all of these people's children to figure out what factors are most important when it comes to healthy aging and a happy life. And in one of the TED Talks where they talk about this study, one of the directors, Dr. Robert Waldinger, says that the people who are most satisfied in their relationships at age 50 were also the healthiest at age 80. And I think I think it's an incredible observation to find in a study. It's not every day where you find that the key to healthy aging has nothing to do with your body, your genes, your intelligence, but in fact, it actually has to do with the quality of the relationships you have and how close you feel those are and how meaningful those kind of relationships can be in our lives. But it goes to show how important social connection is. And that's obviously something that has been a really big challenge during the pandemic. And so, to talk about opportunities to connect, one of the things that I know Dr. Curnew likes to encourage a lot is volunteering. And volunteering in research has also been associated with enhanced mental well being above the age of 40. And we see that it especially increases for the older populations. And I believe in this particular study, they found that it went up from the age of 40, but they especially found at age 70 the benefits of volunteering in terms of increasing and making us feel good with our mental well-being really grows very much. And so I think there's a lot of different unique ways now to be volunteering, some ways where you can be volunteering from home. And I think there's been some more integration of in-person volunteering opportunities now that I think people are slowly starting to come back to. But really want to encourage you to look into those as well if you're interested. And I think a lot of communities have different organizations that have their own volunteering programs. So if you're ever wondering, you can look it up on Google and just look in your area what volunteering organizations fit with your interests as well. Speaking of interest, it can be very helpful to join a support or shared interest group as well. They can be very comforting spaces to not only share your hobbies, but also just share experiences that you've had either like right now over the course of this pandemic and even just in general. I find that one of my greatest joys every week is being able to attend our 3Ms group. We do talk a lot about being mindful and how to move and how to stay motivated, but it's also a place where we spend, I think, a good portion of our meetings talking about gardening, talking about how our daily lives are going and what challenges we're having. And so I think being able to have people that you connect with, being able to have people that you can share the hardest moments of the week with, that can really make a difference in our lives. This next one is community classes or events. This can include physical activity like yoga, Zumba, or Tai Chi classes. It can include art classes, painting, for example, and even enrolling into college courses. I say this because I recall a few instances where I've met many different people from many different backgrounds in my own university courses. And I think it's a really great opportunity to not only learn something, but if there is something that you ever kind of wanted to delve into, but aren't sure if you really like, I think being able to take a course or two on it can be a nice experience to know if you like it or dislike it, and if that's something that you want to continue learning about. And as I just said, another way to connect is to join us. And that can mean 3Ms, but it can also mean our many support groups that we have at our clinic for many different kind of for many different categories and areas of our physical and mental health. Our group focuses on how to stay moving, mindful, and motivated. But I highly encourage you to take a look at our website and see if there's any other group that you feel would be a good fit for you. And please reach out if you ever do have questions. Our group also offers individual support phone calls if you are looking to get support from a volunteer, just for someone to keep you accountable in terms of achieving your goals or talking about how to navigate being stuck or feeling stuck. I think that's a great way to also have support that we offer at the clinic. So yes, just wanted to encourage everyone, if you are interested, to sign up. Okay, so we are nearing the end of our session today. In this last section, I just kind of wanted to talk about and encourage you all to reflect about what things get us through hard times. And as examples, these are all things that I can recall having talked to and also personally experienced, finding it really helpful to rely on these to help me through a stressful or really difficult time. Some of these are things that have come up from our patients in our various groups as well. But I think it's really important to think about what coping strategies we all have, and it's all going to look a bit different. For some people who are more extroverted, they might really enjoy being with people that they love, and that's the way that they manage their stress. For some people, it might be kind of closing everyone else off and focusing on themselves for a night. And it really might be that they enjoy physical activity and they find that to be the most stress relieving. It might be just a simple walk and being able to take a couple or some time just to be mindful and enjoy what's around them. And so, really encourage you to think about what things help you and what things have helped you cope up until this point, because I think those are the things that we definitely fall back on when things do get rough. And this poem is called Let July Be July. I shared this with our 3Ms group a couple weeks ago, and they all really liked it. It's by Morgan Harper Nichols. She's a lovely poet, and it goes, let July be July. Let August be August. And let yourself just be, even in the uncertainty. You don't have to fix everything. You don't have to solve everything. And you can still find peace and grow in the wilds of changing things. And I think it really speaks to the fact that we can't always control what happens to us. Just like we weren't able to predict what was going to happen for the last 3 years. But what we can take control of and what we can remember that we still have the ability to change is how we treat others, how we choose to be resilient and adapt to our situation, and just the ability to choose to be kind and to be there for one another. Those are all things that we do have control over. And so really encourage you to think about those moments when you're really feeling down, is to think about what things have supported you up until this point, who has supported you up until this point, and also what things would make that moment feel a bit better. And I just really wanted to make this webinar an opportunity for us to all think about our own coping strategies, our ways to manage stress. And so in today's webinar, we've covered mindfulness. We did a bit of a mindfulness activity and talked about how it helps with becoming more self-aware. We talked about the STOP acronym. And when discussing anxiety, I also talked about cognitive distortions and how we can challenge anxious thoughts. And just in general, feeling better, we just talked about how our thoughts, our habits, and relationships are key to supporting our well-being. And it's really so true that all parts of our health, be it physical, mental, and social, they're all so interconnected. That's so important for us to kind of take care of all of them and take care of all those parts of ourselves that make us feel good. So, oh yes, and before I forget, do check out our new website. That was the one I just mentioned, to sign up for our many lovely groups to work with all of our wonderful volunteers. I think this website looks amazing. The team did such a great job with it, and I really encourage you to take a peek and just look through all the tabs that are there. And that brings us to the end of our webinar. Thank you so much for sticking around and listening to me talk. I hope you enjoyed it and would love to hear what you took away from it, if you feel comfortable sharing, either in the chat or comments below. And of course, if you'd like more information on any of the tools we talked about, it'll also be linked in the description box.